My dad and brother tried to steal my house at 3 a.m., so I had them both arrested. I came home from a 3-day work trip to find a U-Haul backed into my driveway, not parked on the street. In my driveway, rear doors open. Two guys I'd never seen before were carrying boxes through my front door like they had somewhere to be. My brother Tyler was standing on the lawn, pointing at things, giving directions like he was the one who lived there. My dad was in the hallway, just standing there, arms crossed, relaxed, like this was perfectly normal, and I was the one who had shown up unannounced. He saw me come in and said, "Your brother needed a safe place. You have 3 bedrooms." That was it. No, hey, welcome back. No, I should have called. No, I'm sorry to surprise you. Just, you have 3 bedrooms, so we made a decision for you. I want to tell you what I did next. But first, the key wasn't the real violation. What they had planned to do with it was. For context, I'm Doazit Shishapte. I work in project coordination for a mid-size logistics company, which means I travel a fair amount too, sometimes 3 trips a month, usually 2 to 4 days at a time. I bought this house 2 years ago when I was 25. I saved the down payment myself over 4 years, living in a studio apartment and packing lunches every day. My parents didn't contribute anything to it. Not a dollar of the down payment, not a cosign, nothing. I'm not saying that to be cruel. I'm saying it because it matters to what comes later. It's a 3-bedroom house. I use 1 bedroom as my home office, where I work when I'm not traveling. 1 is the guest room, which I keep ready when people visit. 1 is mine. It is not a large house. It is my house. My brother Tyler is 20. He left community college after 1 semester and has had maybe 6 jobs since then. None of them lasted more than 2 months. Currently, unemployed. His girlfriend Ashley is 6 months pregnant. They've been staying at my parents' place, which is a 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom house with 4 people in it. It's cramped. I understand that. That's genuinely hard. About 8 months ago, I gave my dad a spare key. The purpose was specific, and I said it out loud when I handed it over. Water the plants, check the mail when I'm traveling. That's it. The key lives on his keychain. I put a label on the tag myself. It says emergency only. 6 months ago, at Sunday dinner, my dad said casually, "You know, that spare room is just sitting there." I said, "It's my office." He said, right, and nodded and changed the subject to something else. He smiled a little as he reached for the bread. I didn't think much about that smile at the time. I should have. My flight landed at 11:58 that morning. I took a rideshare from the airport, the same driver I'd used a few times before. I remember talking about nothing traffic, the weather warming up, the usual. I was tired. I just wanted to put my bag down and be home for a few days. Then I turned onto my street and saw the U-Haul. I walked inside. My dad said what he said. Tyler looked at me and said, "Relax, man. It's just temporary. We'll be out of your hair in 3 months." I asked who had authorized this. My dad said, "I used the key. I made a judgment call." He said it with the same calm voice you'd use to explain that you'd let the dog out. I told the movers politely, because none of this was their fault, to please step outside for a few minutes. They did, without argument. Tyler looked at me like I was the irrational one, standing in my own hallway. I called 911. My dad said, "Let's not do anything dramatic." The officer who responded was professional and patient with everyone. He explained to Tyler and Ashley that this was not their residence, that they had no written agreement, no lease, no legal right to be there. He issued a formal trespassing warning. Tyler and Ashley had to wait outside. The movers left. The U-Haul sat in my driveway for another couple of hours until Tyler found someone with a truck to take the load. My dad had technically not trespassed. He had a key, and he argued he was acting in a caretaking role. The officer noted that, but also made clear that the property decisions were mine alone to make, regardless of who held a key. That afternoon, I sat in my house alone and tried to identify what I was feeling. It wasn't quite anger. It was more like discovering that the floor you've been standing on has been slightly hollow the entire time, and you only just found out. Then my phone started going. The family group chat had already exploded before the U-Haul was even out of my driveway. My dad had posted a long message. I won't reproduce the whole thing, but the summary was, I was cold. I was selfish. I had called the police on a pregnant woman with nowhere to go. I was choosing a roof over my pride instead of a roof over my family. He painted a picture of me as someone who had been given everything and couldn't find it in himself to give anything back. He did not mention that the U-Haul had arrived while I was still on a flight. He did not mention that no one had called to ask me. He did not mention where the crib was being placed. My Aunt Jennifer, my dad's sister, commented almost immediately. I always knew he thought he was better than the rest of us. She added a string of other things about family values and what it means to show up for people. Tyler posted a GoFundMe within 2 hours. The title was something like "Help my girlfriend and our baby refused by family." In 2 days, it raised a few $100s from cousins and relatives who had heard only the one version. My mom called me privately. She was crying. She said, "Just let them stay for 3 months. They'll get on their feet. Please, just 3 months." I told her I loved her. I said no. I hung up and sat with the guilt of that for a while, because I do love her, and I knew she was caught in the middle of something she hadn't started. I didn't respond to the group chat. I didn't say anything about the GoFundMe. But I kept coming back to a text Tyler had sent from the curb that afternoon. "You humiliated Ashley in front of strangers. She's 6 months pregnant. What is wrong with you?" And then, a few minutes later, "I know how this works. You can't keep us out forever." That second message, I didn't understand exactly what it meant that day. I found out later. I started thinking about the years before this. 3 years ago, my dad asked me to co-sign a car loan for Tyler. Tyler's credit was a disaster. I said no. My parents didn't speak to me for nearly a month. The Thanksgiving before last, at the dinner table, my dad said, "You live alone in a 3-bedroom house. Don't you think that's a little selfish?" Jennifer nodded. I let it pass. And then the smile. 6 months ago, when I said the spare room was my office, this wasn't spontaneous. My dad had been testing my no for years, and every time I held one, there was a consequence: the silent treatment, the guilt, the family story about how I was the difficult one. They had been building towards something. They waited until I was 2,000 miles away to make their move. Tyler's text, "I know how this works," started making more sense. He wasn't improvising. He'd done research. Not the kind that would actually work, but the kind a 20-year-old reads at 2 a.m. and half understands. If he could establish himself as a resident long enough, I'd have to go through formal eviction proceedings instead of a simple trespass removal. It wouldn't give him ownership of anything, but it would make removing him slow, expensive, and ugly. That was the plan. Make it painful enough that I'd give up and let them stay. A few days after the group chat, I got a text from a number I didn't recognize. "We'd like to sit down and talk. Thursday morning, Riverside Coffee, 11. Please just come." I went. I don't entirely know why. Maybe I still wanted to believe there was a version of this that could be walked back. I walked in, and there was a long table near the back. My dad, my mom, Tyler, Ashley, and my Aunt Jennifer. All seated, all looking at me as I came in. My mom had her hands folded in her lap like she was bracing for something. Nobody smiled. It wasn't a conversation. It was a tribunal. Jennifer went first. She said I had called the police on my own blood. She said the stress I was causing Ashley was harmful to the pregnancy. She said family doesn't operate on legal technicalities, it operates on love. She said my house sitting mostly empty while a baby was on the way was something she couldn't understand from someone who claimed to care about his family. Tyler said he was trying to change, that this baby was the thing that was finally making him serious, that all he needed was a few months of stability and he would never ask me for anything again. My dad said he had raised me to be family first, and that this was a defining moment, and that he hoped I would choose to be someone my future self would be proud of. My mom didn't say anything. She looked at the table. I let them all finish. Then I picked up my phone. I already had a basic doorbell camera facing the driveway and a small indoor security camera covering the front hallway. I'd installed both the year before after a package disappeared while I was traveling. After the U-Haul incident, I upgraded to a full cloud system covering the side of the house and the perimeter gate. But those first 2 cameras had been running the whole time. Including that morning, I opened the footage from the driveway and hallway cameras and set my phone flat on the table where everyone could see it. The timestamp read 11:42 a.m. My flight had landed at 11:58. The video showed the U-Haul backing in. It showed my dad using the spare key. And then it showed Tyler walking through the house with one of the movers, moving through the hallway, opening the door to my bedroom, my room, not the guest room, and pointing at my closet. I paused it. "The crib was going in my bedroom closet," I said. "Not the guest room." Nobody at the table said anything for a moment. I pulled up the smart lock access log on the same phone. My dad had accessed my front door 4 separate times in the 3 months before that morning, not all of them while I was traveling. Twice on a Tuesday afternoon when I was home, working in my office. He hadn't mentioned stopping by either time. I closed the app. I looked at Jennifer. "You have a 4-bedroom house," I said. "Your kids are grown. They've both moved out. Why aren't Tyler and Ashley moving in with you?" She said, "That's a different situation. Tell me how," I said. She opened her mouth. She looked at my dad. He was looking at his coffee. She didn't finish the sentence. "I'm not doing this to punish anyone," I said. "But I'm done explaining myself. This conversation is over." I left money for my coffee and I walked out. I didn't look back at the table. I sat in my car in the parking lot for a few minutes before driving. Not because I was upset. I was past upset by that point. I was sitting with something closer to clarity. I had gone to that table still half hoping there was a version of my family that could acknowledge what they'd done. A version of my dad who might say, even quietly, that he'd overstepped. A version of Jennifer who wasn't performing moral authority while living in a 4-bedroom house with 2 empty rooms. I didn't find that version. What I found was a table full of people who had already decided I was the villain in a story they'd written without me. That was fine. I knew what the story actually was. That was Thursday. I spent Friday morning with a real estate attorney. I had formal trespassing notices drawn up and served by a process server, with signatures collected to Tyler, Ashley, and my dad. I changed the smart lock code and removed my dad's key from the system. I added 2 more cameras, one on the side of the house and one covering the perimeter gate at the edge of the property. I called my grandmother that evening. She's 82. She's been the still center of this family since before I was born, and she has the kind of clarity that comes from having seen a lot of people make a lot of choices over a long time. I didn't ask her to do anything. I just told her everything, start to finish. I wanted someone who knew me to know what had actually happened. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she said, "You did right. That key was for emergencies. What they did wasn't an emergency. It was a plan." She said she was going to call my dad. I said I wasn't asking her to. She said, "I know. I'm doing it anyway." Before bed, I texted my mom. I told her I loved her. I said I wasn't going to be discussing any of this further with anyone in the family. I said that if anyone came to my property without my explicit invitation, I would call the police again. I said that was a promise, not a threat. I wasn't angry when I wrote it. I was just done. I put my phone on the charger. At 2:58 inches the morning, it lit up. Motion detected. Perimeter gate. I lay in bed and opened the camera app. The infrared footage was grainy but clear enough to make out what was happening. Tyler was at the side window of the guest bedroom. He had a crowbar. He was working it under the bottom of the window frame. I called 911. I stayed on the line. I watched. He got the window open. He climbed inside. I told the operator, "My brother just broke into my house. He's inside the guest bedroom." The police arrived in 8 minutes. Tyler was arrested inside the room. He was charged with breaking and entering, possession of burglary tools, and violation of a formal trespassing notice served less than 36 hours before. His phone was seized during booking. Based on the circumstances of the break-in specifically, Tyler's text to me saying, "I know how this works. You can't keep us out forever." Investigators applied for a search warrant. Once it was granted, they went through the device. Investigators found a post Tyler had authored under his own username 6 days before the break-in. The title read something like, "How long do you have to live somewhere before the owner has to legally evict you instead of just calling the police?" It had been bookmarked on his phone. What Tyler was trying to do, manufacture enough of a tenancy claim to force me into a slow, expensive eviction process rather than a simple trespass removal, was right there in his own words. That post was printed and preserved. It became Exhibit A. My dad arrived at the police station around 4:15 inches the morning. I was still there. He walked in, saw me near the front desk, and his face moved through several things before settling into something between exhaustion and fury. "You had your own brother arrested," he said. "He broke my window," I said. "This is over a house," he said. "This is over my house," I said. The officer at the desk didn't say anything. He just watched us. There was nothing else to say. My dad had a position that family absorbs things, covers things, makes things disappear, but he didn't have an argument. He sat down in one of the waiting chairs. I drove home as the sky started going light. 2 days later, at 3:07 inches the morning, my phone lit up again. Motion detected. Perimeter gate. My dad was at the gate. With him was a man in a work shirt carrying a tool bag, a locksmith, the van behind him marked as a 24-hour service. They had entered through the unlocked pedestrian gate beside the driveway and were already standing inside the posted property line. My dad was pointing at the main driveway lock while the locksmith opened his tool bag. The day before, I had added a second small camera at a lower angle on the gate post. I had footage from two directions. Both showed my dad's face clearly, showed them standing on my property, showed the locksmith's tools already out. The timestamp read 3:07 a.m. I called the police. My dad was arrested at 3:22 a.m. He was charged with criminal trespass, unlawful entry, and because he had misrepresented himself to a licensed professional as the property owner in order to obtain services, false representation to obtain services. The locksmith cooperated fully once the situation was explained to him. He had no idea. I called my grandmother at 7 that morning. When I finished telling her, she was quiet for a long moment. She said, "I'm sorry it came to this. Then, but you did right." She didn't call my dad that day. She didn't tell me if she ever did. The legal process ran its course over the following months. Tyler received a 2-year suspended sentence and 200 hours of community service. His record now includes breaking and entering. At the sentencing hearing, the prosecutor read the forum post into the record. Tyler's username was visible in the screenshot. The date was visible. 6 days of premeditation, documented in his own words, read aloud in open court. My dad received a 1-year suspended sentence. As a condition of his sentence, he was prohibited from entering or approaching my property. His record includes criminal trespass, unlawful entry, and false representation to obtain services. About 3 weeks after Tyler's arrest, Ashley called me. She didn't apologize. What she told me was something her mother, Linda, had shared with her. Tyler had forwarded that forum post to Linda 3 days before the U-Haul showed up, explaining the plan. Linda had kept that message. According to Ashley, Tyler had told her they were going to stay a few days while Dad smoothed things over. She didn't know about the tenancy scheme. She didn't know about the crowbar. She found out the same way everyone else did. Ashley ended the relationship. A few months later, after the baby was born, she filed for sole custody. I don't know all the details of what happened between them after that. That's her story to tell, not mine. What I do know is that Tyler, who hadn't kept a job for more than 2 months in his adult life, was suddenly working full-time warehouse shifts to meet a court-ordered child support payment. Sometimes consequences are the only thing that actually moves people. I'm not glad it happened the way it did, but I notice he's working now. My mom filed for divorce. She called me once to say she hadn't known about the locksmith, hadn't known about the 3 a.m. plan. I told her I believed her. We don't talk often. When we do, we talk about small things, the weather, a show she's been watching, how her garden is doing. We don't talk about my dad. We don't talk about Tyler. I think she's still processing what the last few years actually were, and I'm not going to rush that for either of us. The relationship is quiet now, but the door isn't locked. My dad is at a long-stay motel somewhere across town. I haven't sought out the details, and I haven't needed to. A few months after everything wrapped up, I finally furnished the guest room properly. Not for a tenant. Not as emergency housing for someone who had already decided it belonged to them. I put a reading chair in the corner, a lamp, and 3 shelves of books I'd had in boxes since I moved in. I painted the walls a color I actually liked. It's the quietest room in the house. Now it's where I go on Sunday mornings and just sit. I make coffee, I bring it in there, and I read until noon. They had walked through my house assigning rooms before I even landed. Now every room has a purpose I chose. The GoFundMe came down quietly after Tyler's arrest. The family group chat is still there, as far as I know. My dad's message, Jennifer's comment, all of it's still up, untouched. I left the chat sometime in the middle of everything. I haven't looked back in. People ask me if I regret it. If I regret calling the police that first afternoon, or pressing forward with the charges, or any of it. Some of them ask with genuine curiosity. Some of them ask the way people ask when they're hoping you'll say yes, so they can feel better about the version of events they've already settled on. I don't. By the time Tyler was at my window with a crowbar, I wasn't angry. I was just following the situation to its logical end. I had been clear, and clear hadn't been enough. I had given an inch, and someone had spent 6 months researching how to exploit it. The key was for emergencies. What they did was never an emergency. It was a plan. I'd rather be a villain with boundaries than a hero without a home. Hebe Keys.